Ledger is a writing podcast and hopefully a tool to help you reach inside. I'm your host, Austin Wilson. Welcome to today's show. And as you saw from the title, I have Andre Dubus III for today's episode. He's the author of House of Sand and Fog, Townie, Dirty Love, Such Kindness, and more, along with his newest one. It's a collection of essays called Ghost Dogs on Killers and Kin. I first encountered him through hearing about House of Sand and Fog when it was chosen for Oprah's book club. I bought a copy of it, but I didn't read it immediately for some reason. But the first one of his I did read was his fantastic memoir called Townie. It's about his life growing up amongst violence and experiencing his parents' divorce and also how he discovered writing. He's the son of Andre Dubus, one of the most lauded short story writers of all time. His work is also a must-read. We do talk about that a little bit. Townie, seriously, it's one of the most important books you can read about masculinity, I think. But it's also covers, feeling pulled towards creative acts. And I really do think it's just a deeply, deeply emotional book filled with such insane compassion for humans. I legitimately knew it was already in the process of changing me when I read the opening scene, which is about Andre going for a run with his dad. I seriously cannot recommend the book enough. It's fantastic. He reads the audiobook too, so if you're into audiobooks, grab that. And if you've listened to the show before, you know I've talked about an appearance Andre made at Politics Prose. I've covered that in a previous shorter episode, so you know his work holds super deep meaning for me. I'm just so incredibly grateful and thrilled that I got to have him on the show. We chat about his impulse towards fiction versus nonfiction, and if there is or isn't a difference or a distinction between those things for him, how he came to teaching and what that means to him, the importance of maintaining the carpentry that he and his brother put together in Andre's house. His brother's name's Jeb. We talk about poetry and beauty and love and how feeling follows action. I think that's such a great quote. I literally just finished editing the episode, and I guarantee you no one and nothing could keep me from getting to the page today to put words down. I really hope this episode has that effect on you as well. I had a blast talking with Andre. It's one of my favorite episodes. Thank you to Andre. Thank you to you, as always, for listening to this. And also, go to austinrwilson.com to check out my work. You can go to patreon.com/ledgerpodcast to support the show if you'd want to. Like, subscribe, comment, share, do all of those things. Follow me on Instagram at mossheartbooks if you want to get updates and little clips of the show that I put out. I do that stuff a lot more now. But as for now, here is my chat with Andre Dubus III. Well, the impulse, that impulse to tell stories, and because your new book is nonfiction,
yeah,
I'm curious about the impulse to tell stories based on characters we make up, or where we're telling stories reflecting the world that we live in and true stories. And there's one quote from I think it's in The Golden Zone. It's one of my favorite stories in Ghost
God,
Dogs.
that.
I love that story so much for
Thank
a
you.
lot of reasons. But towards the end of it, as you and Christoph are leaving Mexico, for any of the listeners out there, you got to read the story. It's amazing. You said you needed to get back to the empty page, but this time with more faith that I might be able to find something true there without having lived it myself.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was such an awesome thematic, through line connecting your world as a fiction writer and now this book as nonfiction. So tell me about those impulses to tell made up character stories, but then to also be like, I'm going to tell you some brutally honest truth about me, Andre, in the world.
Yeah, you see me wincing with that brutally honest. You could throw in, emotionally naked. That's why I'm wincing. But you have to. I think a personal essay needs to be personal. I
Yeah.
think, but let me back up. So I'm gonna look at your word choice of telling stories, and honestly, for me, it's always gone better for me when I've not set out to do that. When instead of trying to, this just may be semantics, but instead of setting out to tell a story, I really find myself setting out to find a story or find the story that's coming. And, there's a wonderful line from Tim O'Brien, The Things That Carry Tim O'Brien. He says, writing fiction involves a desire to enter the mystery of things. Isn't that beautiful? Involves a desire to enter the mystery of things. So for me, that's what it's always been about, man. I mean, like right now, I'm deep into a novel, and honestly, I was painting my balusters on one of my decks today just to get the f away from the novel. Yeah, sometimes you need to walk away. So I'm walking away for a few days. I really need some distance to. I don't know. It's doing a number on me. It may be a good number. It may be a bad number, as in it's all failing. But failure is absolutely essential for anyone trying to create art, I think. So I'll go with where it goes. But let me get to your question about the nonfiction and too, Austin. Like, the essay form, you probably know it comes from the French verb essayer, to try or to attempt. And what I love about the essay form, and so over the years, so that new book, Ghost Dogs on Killers and Kin, I think there are 18 or 19 essays in there. And I call them from about 40 I've written and published over the last 30 years. And I find myself finishing a novel or a novella or a story, and then often I'll just feel the need to write directly about something I've experienced. And I even stepping into that, I'm not trying to tell a story, even with like the Golden Zone, which is about literally, it sounds like I'm making this shit up, but I'm not. 22, 23 years old, looking for a contract killer with my boss, who was a bounty hunter, and we went to Mexico looking for him. Um, there are parts of that I just had to unpack. Like, what the hell was I? What in the world? What was I doing? And it's what I love about writing. And you probably identify with this as a writer yourself. That great line from Grace Paley: "We write what we don't know we know." And it's kind of like 3 in the morning. I'll come up with this man's name. He's a psychoanalyst out of England working now, but he's got this great phrase: "The unthought known." Isn't that gorgeous?
That's amazing.
So this notion of mystery, the unthought known. I think about Rumi's wonderful line, "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment." So for me, I've been writing all my adult life, and now I'm getting up there, and I've lost no enthusiasm for it because the mysteries never end.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's about for me. Whether I'm stepping into what turns into a novel, or it's a short story, a novella, or an essay, or a memoir, that's what it's about for me, man. Stepping into the unknown. I don't know what I'm doing, which is great, wonderfully anxiety provoking, by the way.
Oh, it's magnificent to test yourself, to just daily be like, am I gonna be okay after I sit down to do this?
Yeah, and contrary to what a lot of non-writers will ask you if you write about something disturbing, like what I wrote about in the Golden Zone, and also in that essay Relapse that ends that book, Ghost Dogs. It's the opposite of therapeutic. It's more like sticking your face in an oven that's on and keeping it there until you're done. And so it often feels wounding to write as nakedly as I try to write.
Gosh, yeah, that really gets at the heart of one of the questions that I was saving towards the end, but I think it matches up here, which is about a lot of your stuff really touches on the theme of how violence clings to us.
Yeah.
And I sort of entered your work in a strange, like, circuitous route. Like, Townie was my first, although I had a copy of House of Sand and Fog, and
Mm.
I had heard about you before I had heard you had a dad who wrote short stories. So that was kind of my way in, and Townie really reoriented my brain in a lot of amazing ways. And I'm so curious about if you think you are still writing in a way, or if you maybe were ever writing in a way where you are like almost still trying to get that violence off of you.
Boy, that's a good question, man. And the honest answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I mean, look, I've never been to war.
Yeah.
And I've got students who've been to war and friends who've been to war. But I know violence at a street level, and not gun violence. I grew up in a time where not everybody wasn't packing a gun now. I mean, now I would be shot to death for the stuff we used to fist fight over in these mill towns I grew up in the 70s. I can tell you, like right now, I'm in my bedroom and I'm looking at between my bedside table with about 400 books on it. and our bed is a Louisville Slugger bat. And I live in this beautiful big house in the woods that Oprah helped me build. And it's a really safe, entitled little neighborhood in the woods north of Boston. But I'm still waiting for the bad guys to come, and I refuse to own a gun. So that's to protect me and my wife, any kid visiting. And so, the part of me that grew up in violence, street violence, it's so alive and well, or not well. And to answer your question, I don't know about what I love about writing. Back to where we began.
Yeah.
Some ancient Chinese poet said, "We poets knock upon the silence for an answering music." And whenever I knock upon the silence, Austin, what comes are people in trouble, and often, who are out of spiritual fuel, if they ever had any, and so their backs are against the wall. It's the kind of people I grew up with, and it was the kind of person I was becoming until, frankly, and I write about this in Townie, until creative writing saved my life and got me off the path of physical violence and expressing myself only in that way. But I don't know, man. I still I think I'm writing myself, you know, a beautiful bookseller whose name escapes me, Michael, and I know it was in like Corte Madera, California, beautiful independently owned bookstore. He introduced me once, and I don't know, I thought it was a funny introduction, but I don't know who wants to read my books after it. He said, Dubus's characters are people who get dealt a bad hand and then play them badly. So,
This
well, there you go.
is good.
I think he's onto something. So I don't know if I answer your question about violence, but I do know that the violence of my youth has never left my tissues.
Yeah.
Yeah, still
Yeah.
there.
Well, I'm curious too. And I mean, after I interacted with your work and I made my way to your dad's, obviously, and I got that collected edition of his short stories, and
Right.
I read Killings. And weirdly, my best friend had been obsessed with this movie called In the Bedroom,
Yeah.
and he told me about it. And I was so curious after we watched it because I think it's a perfect film. If anyone's listening and can get that on 4K and release it, please do.
It's a masterpiece by Todd Field.
It's
Yeah, his first feature.
absolutely yeah, it is a masterpiece, no doubt about it, and so is Tar. Like, holy crap, that
Yeah.
movie blew my mind. Anyway,
Well, not to mention Little Children. Todd
oh god,
Field's the real deal.
he just cannot stop. Dude's batting a thousand. Like, they're
Yeah,
amazing.
I agree.
Anyway, the connections between your dad's work and yours surprised me only in Killings, and reading your stuff and seeing the violence in it and seeing those comparisons, but also seeing the differences and your violence being what I would say is a lot grittier and a lot more in your face.
Hmm.
I was just so curious if you guys had ever spoken about that or how.
Well, it's interesting you say that. There's a wonderful line from Willa Cather. She said, "A writer is at her best only when writing within the character and range of her deepest sympathies." And I think that's one sophisticated way to talk about write what you know.
Yeah,
Of course, you don't know what you know until you're writing it. And to get to fighting in the old man in me, my father wasn't a fighter.
yeah,
Ironically, I mean, he was a Marine and a Marine captain, but he'd never been in a fist fight. And when I became you know, one of these guys who fought all the time in the mill towns where I grew up, you know, he he put me on a bit of a pedestal and asked me how to throw a punch and what do you do. And I think I wrote about this in Townie. All I'm saying is maybe that quality that you talk about is it's because I'm writing from something I know intimately in my body
yeah,
and in my soul. And but he was such a major artist. I mean, his powers of empathy, observation. I teach that story Killings to my students at UMass Lowell every semester, well, at least every year. And um and I think I wrote about this in I might have been one of the essays, or maybe it was in Townie. So maybe you already know this, but it was the first story my dad's ever read, and now I teach it all the time, and I love that story, and I love the movie based upon it. But the old man did not personally know physical violence himself. and I did, and that may have something to do with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Related to teaching, I'm like you. I love quotes.
Mm.
And one of my favorite things when I get to watch interviews with you or read interviews with you, and you've done it here too, is you're a nonstop person. You can just pull amazing quotes out, and I think they cut to the heart of a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. And
I think maybe that's why I do it, just to cut to the heart,
yeah,
and I call on someone else's wisdom to do it because 'cause I'll go off forever.
well, yeah, but if somebody else has like 6 words that just knock you on your ass, like
Yeah,
use them.
why not?
And so I wanted to talk to you about your decision to teach when you knew, because you write beautifully in Townie about that day when you grabbed the pencil and started writing a story. But I was curious to know more about when you felt the pull to teach. And I have a quote from a character that I love from one of your contemporaries, Michael Chabon. He's another one of my favorite
Yeah,
writers. Grady
wonderful.
Tripp and Wonder Boys says, nobody teaches a writer anything. You tell the ones that have it to keep at it, and you tell the ones that don't to keep at it too, because that's the only way they're going to get where they're going.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I'll, it, man, it hits me. And Michael Douglas delivers it in the movie beautifully. But I was curious about you making that decision. Like, okay, I'm going to teach now.
Well, it was divine accident. I was working, I've been I was a self-employed carpenter all through my 20s and 30s with my brother Jeb, who we just lost in February.
Oh man,
And
I'm sorry. I didn't know.
yeah, man, sucks.
That
But
sucks.
I mean, real quick. So I'm painting these balusters of this balcony outside my dining room. My brother and I built my house together, and he built every bit of that deck, and it's so beautiful to maintain his work now that he's no longer on the earth.
Yeah.
Anyway, my buddy Joe Herc, a wonderful writer who's got a gorgeous memoir that just came out this month, maybe last week, called "The Invisible Palm of God." It's all about his friendship with my father. He called he I published my first book in 1989, a collection of stories, and I was he knew I was writing at midnight to 2 in the morning, or getting up at 5 and writing till 7 and working construction all day, and he gave the head of the writing department at Emerson College my book, and the three people read, and two were my mother. Maybe the other was my father. And the guy called me, that the director called me and offered me a job teaching a class. And I jumped at it because it was winter and work was slim as a carpenter. And so Austin, I walk in, and I've got like 22 18-year-olds looking at me, and I realized I'd never taken a writing class. I'd never taught a class. How the hell am I going to do this? So I asked them, "Well, what are you guys working on?" And nobody was working on anything except this one, like 18-year-old female human who she had like a 500-page fantasy novel. It was like her fifth one. So anyway, I started to talk, and you know I began. It was a 3-hour class, and I just winged it, man. But I began to see instantly that at that point I've been writing for 10 years, and I realized I had a lot of opinions about it. And I made up a creative writing exercise on the spot, and then I started to, come up with a reading list. And I quickly discovered, Austin, that I loved teaching. Now, let me just back up. I was a member of the Migrant Farm Workers of Academia for a while, teaching at 4 campuses at a time as an adjunct, professor. And I began to get that midwife syndrome where you're helping everybody else have their baby. What about your baby? So you can teach too much. And I was also remodeling houses. We were having our 3 kids. It was an insanely sleepless, stimulating time in our lives, but I still wrote, but I only wrote 10 or 12 or 15 minutes a day. My point, though, is once I got a balance where I wasn't teaching too much, 2 or 3 courses a semester, say, I really began to love it. And what I love about it is that, especially when I get young people in front of me, it sucks being young. I mean, whenever I meet a teenager, I always say, hey, if everyone's telling you these are the best years of your life, they're full of it. These are the worst years of your life. And so if you feel like you're going to curl up in a fetal position and you want to die, that's normal. but it's going to get better. Your
Yep.
20s are going to be great. Your 30s are going to be better than your 20s. Your 40s are going to be better than your 30s. So hold on, kid. Anyway, especially like I'll give a creative writing exercise and I'll read them a poem and I'll give my class an exercise I'm almost moved to tears every time, even now, all these years later, to watch a bunch of fellow human beings with pencil, paper, with their heads bent, trying to express themselves with words. I find so frigging beautiful and hopeful and moving. And they don't even have to have any ability. I love that Shaban quote because I don't care if they have any talent or not. I also have the same attitude. You know, Thomas Williams, the writer, was asked late in his life, "Why do you write?" He said, "Oh, that's easy. I write so I don't die before I'm dead."
It's one of my favorite
But
quotes I
in
found
but
because of
isn't that
you.
great? And so I just asked him, "Look, if that's already you, then you don't need my opinion. You need to keep writing to be yourself." But not everybody in the classroom is going to continue to write, and so what? That means they're going to do something else. But look, man, now I'm 65 and I get these, early retirement offers from my university. And I said, "What are you, high on drugs?" I've never loved teaching more. I'm not
Yeah.
going there.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Williams, because I bought a copy of the Hair of Harold Rue.
Have you read it?
I have not yet.
Yeah, you're gonna love it.
I'm very, very excited. I've had it, honestly, for a few years now,
Yep.
but I read your intro immediately,
Oh, good.
uh,
Thank you.
and there you say a few things in it that ended up matching with a lot of the stuff that I was curious about, specifically about teaching,
Hmm.
and also about making things with your hands.
Yeah.
Because you make a lot of stuff, like you're a carpenter, like you've talked about, and Thomas Williams, built the cabin like that you went out with your dad to visit, and
Yeah.
you built his writer shed. So I was curious about two things.
Yeah.
In that intro, when he was at your party for when you released The Cage Keeper and Other Stories, your first book of collected stories,
Yeah.
he said, "Congratulations on your triumph."
Yep. That's exactly what he said.
And I'm so curious if you, as Andre now, can like access what it felt like at that moment to have your book out and to have this man saying that. Like, I know you in the intro you say sort of that you felt like he was recognizing you as someone who is ignorant of who he was and of literature in general, but I'm just so curious about the journey that you're still on, someone
Yeah,
who put that book out and
I don't know if he knew how ignorant I was, but looking back at that moment, which I did when I was given the honor of writing that intro to the re-release of the Hair of Harold Rue, I I I, I felt like such an oh my god, because I hadn't read him yet,
yeah,
and then I read him, and I said, "Oh my god!" And I think I have that metaphor in the intro. It's like meeting Sugar Ray Leonard without ever having watched him fight.
right.
You don't even know. Okay, he's a nice looking man. You have no idea what his gifts are. You
Yeah.
ignoramus, me. So it's interesting. That was his word choice. Congratulations on your triumph. And you know, that book went to. There are 7 stories in that book. 3 of them were in magazines or quarterlies before they were in the book. And for those 3 acceptances, I had 117 rejections. And the book itself went to 39 publishers over 6.5 years. But when he said triumph, it hadn't occurred to me. And I began to think, well, I guess maybe it is a bit of a triumph. This hasn't been an overnight thing. But I honestly, Austin, didn't feel worthy of the word triumph yet.
Yeah.
Over the years, I don't know. I find myself using that word now, though, for young writers who publish their first book or their first story. And my father has. I don't know if you have had a chance to read any of my dad's essays, but he's got a wonderful essay in his collection, Meditations from a Movable Chair, in which he argues that the triumph, and I think he might use the word triumph. He might even use that word. The triumph is on the desk, whether the world ever notices or not. That manuscript, that stack of pages, that's worth celebrating. I think he says go get drunk over, but he's from another time. you know, we're more careful about health and addiction, but the that stack of pages, that is a triumph. You know how many people set out to write a novel? Let's just talk about novels for a second. A lot of people talk about it, and I certainly support their desire and aim to do it. But I think the majority of people who sit down to do it never finish. It's understandable. It's an ordeal, and it takes years. And so I judge no one for not finishing a novel, but I always tell anyone who's finished a novel, and I've got a bunch of students who have, and some quite a few of whom gone on to publish them. The old man was right. The triumph is on the desk. You did it, whether the world notices or not. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? It's true.
I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna keep that one and remember that for a while.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, it's hard. It's hard. It takes nerve. You know, I used to hate the word author because I thought it sounded really elitist. Author. Come
Yeah.
on. And I like the word writer more because it kind of captures the, what Hemingway called the sweet labor of the work itself. But then I looked up the word author and now I like it. Means because it just literally means the originator or beginner of something.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes nerve to originate or begin something. It takes nerve to step out into nothingness. And so power to anyone who tries and sticks with it. That's beautiful.
Yep, I agree. I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, and yeah, the originator or beginner of something, that
Yeah.
is whew, that's good.
Yeah.
So that connection between building things
Mm,
and or even just tactile experiences. So, I read interviews whenever you do interviews that come out. I read your interview in Paris Review, and in that you talk about holding a stone in your hand
mm.
as you're writing or preparing to write, or like you'll have the
As
stone,
I'm writing, I do hold stones in my hand.
which I that idea I sort of got obsessed with the idea because I hadn't necessarily thought of, well, one, because you write longhand, like I
Mhm,
type, so I can't
mhm.
really hold stones. But you also, yeah, you write longhand with a pencil. The home that you built with your brother, the ramp that you and he built for your dad, and your knitting story that
Yeah.
is in Ghost Dogs and was originally in a collection about knitting. I was just so curious about how your mind connects those two things, or if it does at all. If you
Well,
think of,
I don't know if I consciously think about it, Austin, but I can tell you one of the best days, and I tend to get to have these a lot during the summer, is, I'll write in the morning, going from the dream world to the dream world. Then I'll strap on my carpentry belt and I built this house. Everybody moved away. Now I'm the handyman on this house. Everything's rotting, everything's falling apart. My wife Fontaine has a list that's poor thing, it's 20 years old. But so this is a perfect day for me. Write for 2 to 3.5 hours tops, longhand pencil build stuff. Ideally, like right now, I'm working on also in expanding a deck in the back and love framing. Build stuff all afternoon. Then work out for like an hour and a half, lifting weights. Now I don't run because of my knee, but I'll be on the bike on the back roads. Then I go to the local organic farm near us, and I buy fresh ingredients and I cook for whoever is in the house, and and then go to bed with books. I mean, that's a perfect day for me, and I'm blessed that I get to have a lot of those, when I'm not teaching. And I think it's perfect because there is something about, I'm going to give you another quote. Sean O'Casey or Casey said, "Look, when he went from doing masonry work to being a full time writer, he just went from one manual labor to another." And I think there's some real value to what I like about that is, like right now, I feel inspired about writing because I'm talking to you about it. But I know tomorrow morning I'm not going to want to go down there, but I'm going to go anyway,
yep,
right?
yep,
I'm going to go anyway. And this is what especially now because young people are so anxious and it's a whole nother discussion. But I say, you guys, feeling follows action. Don't wait for the feeling. Start doing the action and the feeling will follow.
oh, that's good. Feeling follows
I mean,
action.
that's how you get through a life and get through a day. So I know that it feels of a piece. to work, on a simple declarative sentence, and then trying to find a prose rhythm that captures this weather and her interior mood and what's going on in the next room with her husband, and then to try to do a perfect 90-degree cut and nail it just so it won't split on a post that'll never ever shift even in 10 below zero temperature because it's 4 feet in the ground past the frost line.
Yeah.
It feels of a piece. And then sauteing garlic and olive oil of a piece. I
Yeah.
think we're supposed to make things. I have this theory that if all everybody did, so I'm thinking especially of Americans who are particularly anxious and depressed, if you just did something vigorous with your body every day, it could be a walk, it could be tennis, it could be lifting weights, push-ups, whatever, and make something, whether it's a loaf of bread, knitting a scarf, you know, painting a picture, planting some flowers, depression will dissipate greatly.
I really think that all of us, every person, whether no matter to what level ability wise, we have an impulse to tell stories and we have some sort of creative impulse. Maybe they're the same things, maybe they're separate for people, but doing a thing, making a thing, I really do agree and think that's an absolutely essential part of the human experience. We
And
have
I'm
to
with you
create.
totally on stories. I found myself not believe I don't believe in a God who knows my name and loves me, but I believe in the divine. I believe in something quite beautiful, mysterious, and invisible in and around us, all around the world, all human beings. And I don't know what it is, but I do know that, every human being in the world needs stories. You got to get your food, shelter, clothing. You got to be safe. You don't want to be bombed by effing Putin.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we get fed in a place that's very deep inside of us by stories, and I can only call it the soul. One of my favorite definitions of art is from Tolstoy. Art is transferring feeling from one heart to another. Transferring feeling from one heart to another. What a great thing that is.
Yep.
And anyway, I feel like that's my task is to try to make it true enough that it'll actually go inside the reader and do something. And it's not even our business what it does, as long
Yeah.
as it does something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question specifically about moments of transcendence and of soul,
Mm,
of something outside of us touching us, or brushing up against us. In your one story, Fences and Fields, you talk about having the revelation that you're going to have a daughter.
yeah.
One of my favorite scenes in Townie is Christoph talking to your brother
Yep.
while he's in the back seat. It breaks my heart every single time, but it also gives me such hope. As a person who has struggled with depression in my past and
Hmm.
had similar experiences as your brother in some cases, um,
Hmm.
those moments of these like, because I also don't believe in any sort of God that is definable through like modern, you know, organized religion, but it seems impossible I that this is what I say to one of my best friend's dad. He's one of my great friends too. He's a pastor and a chaplain at a hospital, and we talk about how there it seems so impossible that this that me couldn't that I'll just stop and have no awareness. It seems impossible because I'm so present. I'm
Yeah.
so aware of everything, of my every thought, that it seems impossible to me. And there's a part of me that's like, there's no way that's just a trick of biology.
Mm.
But who knows?
Have you read Alan Lightman at all, the physicist and novelist from MIT?
I don't think I have.
After we're done, I'm going to send you an excerpt from one of his books about where we go as atoms after our body dies.
Please do. Yeah.
It's very encouraging that we really never die in that sense. Yeah, it's hard to let to I and I've had weird visitations. I had a visitation from my brother who died on Valentine's Day of this year. So yeah, I don't believe in a God, but I believe there's a lot more than what we're doing here.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Well, writing about those, I feel like I'm so curious if all of the times that I've encountered them in your work, if it's felt like that. Because for me, that moment when you grab that pencil in Townie
Yeah.
and start writing that story, th- and you approach this in Townie and in that scene specifically, but like if that was your moment of guidance, kind of.
Well, it felt like a religious experience.
Yeah,
The way that William James talks about, and I've read and heard from other people who've had these epiphanic moments that are much larger than them. I felt something larger than I was sitting me down in a chair. Here I'm training for the Golden Gloves down in Lynn. I'm very serious about it and very committed. And something I can only just it just felt like something divine. Something larger than me said, "Sit your ass down, get a piece of paper and a pencil, and start writing some words." And I've been writing every night since then. That's 40 something years ago. It saved my life, and it came unbidden. It came uncalled.
I love
And
it.
I do too. You know, you know, my poor wife Fontaine. She's a devout Christian. Greek Orthodox, very private about it, very beautifully. She left our church because, frankly, the priest was a bigot,
Yeah,
and but she prays. She's got her own icons here, and she prays every morning and longer on Sundays, and she believes she's a believer.
yeah,
And I'm not. I'm a non-believer, but so there's that moment in Townie where I know I'm going to die a violent death the next day, and I'm freaking out, and I reach for the New Testament beside her, and it's pitch black in the Cotswolds of England, and there's no moon, and it's like a pitch black room, but all of a sudden I can see three words: love one another, and then I can't read anymore. And I tell her that. She says, "And you still don't believe in God?" I said, I believe in you, honey."
the Bible. It was there because of you.
Yeah, it was you. I believe in mystery with a capital M.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't know. That's kind of more comforting to me than feeling like that everything is easily answered. That kind of bores me.
I guess that's part of my resistance, Austin, to it all is I just don't believe anyone's got the answers. I I have faith in the questions, and the questions always lead to greater questions. And so I find myself more drawn to human beings and human activity that's about celebrating questions and asking harder questions. I do have some answers on a couple of things. I do think it's wrong to hurt each other.
Yep.
And I think no matter what political, especially now in our country, right? No matter what political stripe we are, we got to find a way to talk to each other and not demonize each other. We're
Yep.
all, it's again back to Tolstoy's definition of art. Art is transferring feeling from one heart to another. What I love about that is every human heart needs to be moved, needs to be loved, needs to show love.
Yep.
And we get it all so wrong. And so I have answers. I have some real black and white thoughts about behavior. I think it's very important that we treat each other the way we would like to be treated. But the rest of it, if someone says they have the answers, I go somewhere else.
Me too.
Yeah, I don't. Sorry, don't. I'm happy for you. I'm going over here now.
Yep. See you
I'm going to
later.
read some Rilke.
Well, along the lines of a little more just like nuts and bolts. When I found out you wrote longhand, I was so curious about drafting.
Mm.
About because there's a video and listeners of the show will know I've talked about it before because it means a lot to me. You at Politics and Prose talking about writing and talking about how long it took you to write House of Sand and Fog and how many kids you had afterwards and how long it took. And I'm so curious about how drafting works for you. If you do consecutive drafts in longhand or like when it makes the jump to a digital page.
Well, this is what I do. I begin each day reading a few poems. I've been reading poetry every morning for 40 something years. I have thousands of books of poems. And then I will type. Okay, because when I wrote House in Fog, I wrote it in a graveyard in my parked car. 3 years of writing winter, spring, summer, fall in this car, 22 notebooks. Took me a year just to type them. And so now I begin each day by typing the previous day's work into the computer, and then I shut the computer, throw it over there, and I put on headphones so I can only hear my heartbeat and my breath. Sharpen my pencil, usually with a razor knife from my carpentry belt days, and then I just keep dreaming. I'll just write again. But so I keep a running file. I try not to rewrite too much as I go. I'll read a sentence over and I know it needs work. It's clunky. It's ugly. It's not right. But if I believe it reflects truth, I won't mess with it too much. But if I have a false note, I need to fix that before I continue. That's when I revise for truth as I go. If I don't believe it's raining outside and it's, oh yeah, well shit, it's actually August in Idaho, whatever. I got to bring the sun in, but I don't try to make it too pretty too soon. There's a wonderful interview with Tobias Wolff. I don't know if you know Wolff's work. Beautiful. Have you read Bullet in the Brain by Toby Wolff?
I have not.
Oh my God, I'll send you that too. 3-page masterpiece.
I'm excited.
3-page masterpiece. In one of his interviews, he said, I need to write at length before I can write in brief. And,
Man.
and I just love that, right?
Yep.
So I give myself permission to overwrite, overwrite, overwrite. I mean, really, I'll have, my novel, The Garden of Last Days, I think it was 880 pages in manuscript. And I cut 6 characters and 250 pages before the book.
Holy
So,
smokes.
so I really allow myself to write at length, to paraphrase Wolf, before I write in brief. And I think, honestly, I think that's what people talk about when they talk about giving yourself permission to write crap or write badly. No writer wants to look at the desk each day and think this sucks every day. That's just
Right.
demoralizing. You got to feel, at least you have to feel like it's worth reading. But I think what it really means is give yourself permission to overdo it, to overwrite, to have a bloated draft, to go down a road. John Updike said it better. He said the writer paints 5 doors on the wall, but only one will open.
Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
But you got to write those five. Old Man in the Sea. It's really like a 98-page novella. Do you know where it came from? A 1,500-page, 3-volume stack of work Hemingway spent 7 years on, called The Sea Book. And one day he wakes up and says, the only thing worth a damn in that pile of pages is the story of the old man, the fish, and the boy. And he cut everything down, but he had to build the entire oyster to get the pearl. And the pearl was that gorgeous novella, which won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1954.
And just one of the most memorable short novels, just one of the most memorable.
It's a poem of a book. And I tell my, sadly, too many people have to read it in high school and it's too young. They need to read it later and they'll appreciate what a piece of work it is.
I read
Oh,
it in junior high, unfortunately, and did not connect with it. Probably because I also read it the same year that I read The Secret Garden, which had a lot more for me than
and a
the old me.
lot more pages.
Yeah. But I connected with that. But after, I hit a certain age, it meant a lot more to me after I
Yeah, sure.
could
Great.
interact with it. But yeah, you said a lot right there. We get so concerned with if a thing is good right now as we're writing.
Yeah, and I think that's such a mistake, Austin. And we have to talk about capitalism. We have to talk about the commercialization of art. We have to talk about social media. We have to talk
Yep.
about all that. I know that social media isn't all bad. My brother was very sick for years, and it gave him a lifeline to people,
Yeah.
etc. I know it can, but I think it's a largely sinister development. And one of the things I really hate about it is it's made everyone the curator of the Museum of Me,
Yep.
especially young people. And everyone's toxically self-conscious. And one thing I see in the classroom, and this is anecdotal, but I'm sticking to it. My writers, this is also true of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s I work with in conferences. Everyone's being so careful. And I think it's maybe for 3 or 4 reasons. They're worried about, and I think it's at a semi-conscious, if not totally subconscious level. They're worried about how many follows, likes, and comments they're gonna get, and they're worried about being canceled and offend anybody.
Yep.
So no one's writing with bravery. And that's not fair to say. There are a lot of brave, beautiful writers out there, but it's done a number on that. One of my favorite lines from any novel anyone's ever written is from Nadine Gordimer's novel, A Sun Story, where one character has an insight as to what sincerity has. It's a middle aged woman, and she thinks sincerity is never having an idea of oneself.
Oh yeah,
Isn't that gorgeous?
that's great.
So you don't have one eye on the mirror to see how you're doing. You are so engrossed in doing that, the self falls away. And Flannery O'Connor has talked about that too, that the self must be forgotten. And so it's hard to forget the self when everyone needs a fucking media platform. I'll say the
Yep.
fucking F word. I get so angry at publishers too. Excuse me, it's a $29 book. Austin buys my book or I buy his. We get $2.90. You earn your money. You make the book public. I'm going to go write another one. I'm not going to get on these goddamn fucking things.
Yep.
Oh my God. Forgive me.
No, no,
Um, I
I've
get
talked about
angry
this. I've
because,
talked about this with other writers
yeah,
because it is so I was born in 84. So I had a good 15, 18 years before this shit started to grab me. So I have a long memory relatively
yeah,
of a time when I didn't have that weird self-consciousness about what this thing would sound like to someone I don't even know. And I can still I'll find myself on days where the phone grabs me, where I'll
yeah.
be like refreshing a page and I'm like, what in the fuck am I doing?
Well,
I have to
and
like,
that's, well, that's how they're designed. They're
yep,
designed to do just that.
yep.
I have such strong feelings about it. It's why I do not own an iPhone. I love the internet. I can't believe that if I want to hear Miles Davis, boom, YouTube, Miles Davis in 30 seconds. What it's done for the ability to do research has made me a braver writer. I can look it up. My point though is, the handheld gadget has done such a, this is all old news. We know this, but that great line from that Mary Oliver poem, "Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it." Well, how can I be astonished if I'm not paying attention? But let's go back to the creative act. It seems to me like, I've been blessed with, publishing contracts and advances for many years, and but the only reason I took them, I would never take money up front for a book I hadn't written yet until I had 3 kids in college. And then
You're like,
I said,
yes,
"Well,
please give
fuck
it.
it. I write every day. There'll be a book sometime. If you're gonna give me that money, good, because I owe tuition checks right now." But I would only do it, I said, "But I'm not gonna look at the deadline. I'm not even gonna look at it, and I'm not gonna show you anything until I'm done." So thank God I still have a truck and tools. I'll go build you a deck
Yeah,
before I sell out my novel. But my point is, I protect myself from all that.
yeah.
I have never been on social media. I have never Googled my name. I try to protect myself from the noise. My father had I forget what he was talking about. It might have been, I think, just like the career consciousness that can come to a writer when you read the New York Times book review, say, or, any of this. And now with the internet, the career consciousness goes through the roof. And we both talked about this, not long before he died, and I was about 39 years old. We both talked about how important it is to protect you from all that noise. And he had this great metaphor, Austin. He said, "Yeah, it's just static on the radio and it keeps you from hearing the music."
Oh yeah, that's good.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, and he's right. I mean, the those days when I can tell that my brain is it feels like it's avoiding a thing, but what you said earlier is the what was it? The action follows the thought, or what was the
That feeling follows action.
feeling
Do
follows
the
action.
action.
And on those days, I have to fight to start writing anything, because I don't know. There's a part of my brain that's like maybe it's based in fear, but also I'm being distracted, and I have all this shit swirling, those are the days where I'm like, "What I just need to put this shit down, put it in the other room." Sometimes I'll grab a notepad and go, because normally I type, but I'll grab a notepad and just start writing with a pen or a pencil. And my fear is that because of my age, that I'm stuck with some of it.
And what do you mean because of your age? Because
Because I'm young enough, quote unquote, I'm
to be
41, but
yeah.
that a publisher's gonna be like, "Well, you need to have an Instagram account. You need to do this. You need to put videos out." That there's an aspect of it that I can't shake off because I am of a world where it is expected of me to an extent where I could lose jobs or I could lose deals because of it.
Yeah, I hear you, and I know I'm in a privileged position because I've established myself before all this came, and my publisher is very, I apparently have a Facebook account. I have never gone on it. My publisher and agency made me do it years ago, and I said, okay, I wrote a letter, dear fellow humans, I will never visit this page.
That's
You know,
amazing.
but if you
That's
wanna
awesome.
know where I am, here I am. You go to my whatever website, you can look at blah, blah. But my point is, it breaks my heart. I mean, so look, here's the writing in one hand, here's being an author in another. I'm very grateful. I still hate that word, but even though even though it's I'm very grateful, to be an author. The fact that there are books in towns I'll never be in, and people I'll never meet will read one. That's what a gift, what a blessing. Because I do it for free anyway, because I have to do it.
Right.
But in this hand is the writer, and even though my family's financial health depends upon me to continue to write and publish books, 99% of the reason I go down there is to write sentences and penetrate the mystery of human beings called characters, who I think we have a sacred duty to bring to life on the page. So let's just talk about that. To
Yeah.
me, this is sacred work. This is holy work. This is important. Tim O'Brien said in The Things That Carried, stories save us. You've talked about it today. It's not a small endeavor, and capitalism once again can ruin everything. It's going to come in and cheapen it. I was just talking about Michael Ondaatje the other day with a friend who, after the great international success of The English Patient and then the film adaptation, a journalist was, kind of breathlessly asking him, "Well, Mr. Ondaatje, what are you working on now?" He said, "Nothing. I'm not a factory." I
Oh god.
frigging love that.
I do too.
He said, "I did a collage the other day. I might write a poem. I'm thinking about making a documentary." And I said, "Well, God bless you, brother. We're not factories."
Yep.
And it does get complicated when money's involved, but
Yeah.
it's a challenge. And I think there's a lot about it we should fight back against.
I agree 100%. And I love the idea of thinking that it's holy. And also I think related to some of the stuff we talked about with social media and how scared and anxious people are, like this idea of like being cringe or like of doing something that you should be ashamed that you love as much, or like art being like, no, 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 art is not just a thing that's neat. Like Dead Poet Society taught it to me early, and I've heard Ethan Hawke, speak about it beautifully, but like it's not just a thing that is fun and can like be the thing. It is also that, like, yes, it can be the thing where you're like having fun or it makes your day a little bit better and then you move on, but it is a vastly important part of being a human. Like we need it.
Yeah, yeah, especially the kind of work that that I prefer reading. I prefer realism, but I think all forms are wonderful.
Yeah.
A human story, honestly told, is worth reading for anybody. My point is, I'm sure you've seen this study that people who read fiction, let's just talk about adults who read fiction,
Yep.
tend to be more tolerant, more compassionate, less racist, less homophobic, more patient, because the contract between the work and the reader is, why don't you step inside my private skin for a little bit? Let's see what it's like to be this person, that person. It enlarges us. One of my favorite lines, and I've got a anthology out that I edited called Reaching Inside, and it comes from Tim O'Brien. The Things That Carry Tim O'Brien has been a friend for many years, and I brought my graduate students in the early 90s to his reading from his novel In the Lake of the Woods. This is in Boston. Afterwards, he and I went out for a beer, and then he signed my book, inscribed it before he got into his cab. And all he wrote was, Andre, I hope this reaches inside. Tim. I said,
Whew.
are you kidding me? I'm like chasing the cab. That's all I'm trying to do, brother.
Come
Jesus
back,
Christ.
Tim.
That's all I'm trying to do. But think about it.
Yeah.
Think of the great works of art, the short stories, the plays, the poems, the novellas, the memoirs, the essays that where you have to go for a walk after because you don't want to talk to anyone for a little bit after because something happened to you. And what a gift. So it's not just entertainment, it's not escapism, it's an enlarging of one's life before we're dead. And when you're walking around in a larger state, guess what? You pass it on to other people.
Yep.
And then they start to feel more authentically alive. And frankly, people who feel more authentically alive don't bomb villages. You think Putin feels authentically alive? No, he's dead inside, which is why he's killing kids in Ukraine. Not to mention orange hair. If he read one novel in his life, one work of art that would go inside him and try to melt that tiny little hard heart he's got, come
That
on.
piece of shit.
Ugh,
Here, I'll stop
peace.
right there.
Yeah,
I
no, don't stop.
when
Look, he's done me a great service, I realized. I
yeah,
didn't realize how much I love my country till that piece of garbage showed up.
he's awful. I
Yeah,
despise everything about him. But also, like, so speaking of Tim O'Brien,
yeah,
another I read The Things They Carried as a person who had absolutely no connection to war, no connection to Vietnam, and that book changed my life as a 18-year-old. I read Going After Cassiato. That's how I've always said it. I don't know if it's
Cacciato.
Cacciato. Going After
Yep.
Cacciato, which is my favorite of his.
Yeah,
It blew my mind.
it's so ambitious.
It's it's absolutely a masterpiece.
Yep,
But that ability to transport people
yep,
and to for me to live these lives that I had no chance of experiencing in the like outside world of these things that Tim O'Brien experienced, and having those stories show up in the middle of Indiana, like I'm in a cornfield reading about him struggling and seeing friends die. And I don't know that I would be the same person that like I guarantee I would be a different Austin right now if I hadn't read those books.
yep,
And
you
that
would.
to me means it's more than just like a fun thing.
Do you remember that it's a 1 page or 1.5 page piece in The Things They Carried style about the Vietnamese girl who's
Yes.
they kill everyone in her hut, and she walks out and she's doing this dance.
Yep.
She's like this trauma grief dance. And then, Kiowa, one of the characters, makes fun of her later, and Dobbins puts him upside down in a well. You know, there's such humanity in O'Brien's work, such compassion, and an unflinch. Here's another one: Akira Kurosawa, the great Japanese filmmaker. To be an artist means never to avert one's gaze.
Oh man, that's amazing.
O'Brien never averts his gaze.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just got that Piece is a Shy Thing by Alex Vernon, the biography of Tim, and
Oh, I didn't know about it. There's a biography of him.
it just came out about 2 weeks ago.
Well, good to know. Who's the writer?
Alex Vernon.
Peace is a what?
Piece is a Shy Thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to be ordering that from my local independently owned bookstore because I've also never and will never buy anything from Jeff fucking Bezos.
I appreciate that.
Also,
I own an independent bookstore, so I love
do
hearing it.
you?
I do.
What's the name of your store?
It's called Moss Heart Books.
Oh, fantastic, man.
Yep, Moss Heart Books. My wife and I opened it last year, and it has been an absolute blast. Like,
Congratulations. Yeah, I have never and I never will buy anything from Amazon.
I
I don't even
appreciate
have an Amazon tab on my website.
it.
Made him take it off.
Good, good. Yeah, he's a piece of shit, and
Yeah.
I'm willing to say
Let's
it.
take them all on.
Yeah, all of them. As we're wrapping up, last couple things. You said one thing one time, I think it was in the Politics and Prose video. Again, I've mentioned it a lot because, again, it meant a lot to me as you were talking on there. But you were talking about you're pregnant with a story like a woman is literally pregnant with a baby, and you need to get
Mhm.
blood to the baby. And
Right.
I was sort of struck by the house you're talking about that you and your brother built. You don't have a writer's room, but you write in the boiler room.
Yeah.
And I was like, Andre Dubus III going down into the womb of his house, into
Yep.
this warm boiler room to write these stories. It just
I
struck
sweat
me
my
as
ass off. I physically suffer down there.
yeah, you stand while you
Well,
write.
yeah, what I do now is I put a plank, so I built this little soundproof cave in the boiler room, but I hurt my back a few years ago, so it's better to stand when I'm writing, and so I put a plank over the stairwell, I'm writing on these plywood shelves, so I put one leg up at a time, and the back's no problem for a few hours. Um, yeah, but now I'm standing in the boiler room on a plank about 18 inches wide. And if I actually step, I almost took a fall. If I step back one step too far, I go about 10 feet down the stairs into the boilers.
That is making the effort for the art.
Feels great. And,
Yeah.
and- mm.
I have this has been awesome. I'm so happy you came on. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh,
And
me too, man.
I'm insanely excited to hear that you're working on another novel. I get every single one that comes out.
Oh, thank you, brother. I got a collection of stories coming out next fall
Okay.
called Make It Black because I love the short story form.
Me too.
Do you write short stories too?
I do. Yep, I do.
Oh,
I write short stories, I write short comics, and I've finished a couple novels. Nobody will ever see them, but they're done.
well, maybe you're wrong about that. I mean,
Well, I'll make sure no one sees one of them for sure. The other one potentially, who knows? But I write. I've been writing screenplays and stuff a lot here recently. But comics, I had a graphic novel come out in 2016 through a place called Magnetic Press,
cool.
and then I've had some short stories that have gotten out there through a few.
What's the title of the graphic novel?
It's called Reproduct Self Applied. I joke with my friends that it's about sad robots. It's about
That's great.
robots with emotions and struggling because they have, hunger pangs, and they feel like they should have sensation in their limbs because they have consciousness, but they don't have those things, so they end up struggling to feel like themselves.
That sounds great.
It's out of print right now. Maybe it'll come back. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, F them. It'll come back.
Well, your short story collection, I'm pumped for that. I love the format too, and it's actually really popular right now. Short stories are blowing up right now.
Yeah. I think it has to do with people's attention span, but that's one good thing that comes out of that, I believe. Hey, man, let's end with a poem. You want to hear a William Stafford poem?
Hit me with a poem, yes.
This is called Yes. It could happen at any time, tornado, earthquake, Armageddon. It could happen, or love, sunshine, salvation. It could, you know. That's why we wake and look out. No guarantees in this life, but some bonuses, like morning, like right now, like noon, like evening. William Stafford.
Oh, damn. This
Peace,
is
brother.
thank you so much, man. I appreciate it a ton.
Next time I'm in your neck of the woods, I'm going to Moss Hart Books.
I love it. Thank you.
Peace. Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Make sure you keep your eyes out for Andre's new book, Make It Black, when it comes out in the fall. And also go check out Ghost Dogs on Killers and Kin, his collection of essays. It has a bunch of amazing stuff in there. Also, he recommended so many things. Bullet in the Brain, a story by Tobias Wolff, is in the New Yorker from September 17th, 1995. I have that pulled up. I'll share a link of that later. I ordered a copy of his dad's book, Meditations from a Movable Chair. They are essays by Andre Dubus. I also ordered a copy of the book he talked about called Reaching Inside, 50 Acclaimed Authors on 100 Unforgettable Short Stories. A lot of stuff to take in with a lot of recommendations and also just a lot of great books that Andre himself has written. So make sure you check all of that stuff out if it grabs your attention. I appreciate you listening, sharing, all of that stuff. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Thank you to Andre, and go get to the page. Get some words down. Say something true to yourself.